The Mississippi Delta stretched endlessly under a sky thick with humidity and shadow, a place where the air itself seemed to hum with secrets. In 1911, a boy named Robert Johnson was born into a world of hardship, poverty, and the simmering racial tensions of the South. From his earliest years, he felt different, restless, and consumed by a hunger that the narrow roads and cotton fields could not satisfy. Music called to him, whispered through the rhythm of the cicadas, the rustle of the reeds, and the creaking of distant porches where bluesmen played in the evenings. As a child, Robert's world was confined by circumstance, yet vast in imagination. He wandered barefoot along dusty roads, strumming a battered guitar with clumsy fingers, trying to coax melodies from the strings that seemed to resist him. At first, his attempts were awkward, discordant, and mocked by those around him. Family members, neighbors, and local musicians shook their heads at the boy who wanted more than survival. Yet Robert persisted. Even then, there was a spark in him, a relentless drive to reach for something beyond the ordinary. By the time he reached adolescence, Robert's fascination with music had grown into obsession. He spent hours in the shadows of juke joints, watching established bluesmen like Son House, Willie Brown, and Charlie Patton. He observed their hands, their posture, the way they made the guitar sing and wail. And though he was often dismissed as inexperienced or inferior, he learned. Every sneer, every dismissal became fuel. He was determined to master the instrument, to make the guitar an extension of his own soul. Yet talent alone was not enough. There were gaps in his skill, in his understanding, and the world he lived in was unforgiving. He disappeared for months at a time, wandering the Delta, living on scraps, hitching rides on freight trains, and sleeping in abandoned barns. People whispered about his absence, about where he had gone, and the stories grew into myth. When he returned, his playing had transformed. Fingers once clumsy now moved with impossible precision. Chords rang clear and haunting, notes bending with a depth that seemed beyond human understanding. It was then that the legend of the Crossroads began to take hold. Some say that at midnight, Robert went to the intersection of highways 49 and 61 in Clarksdale, Mississippi. There, a shadowy figure awaited him. Some claim it was the devil himself. The stranger tuned Robert's guitar, played a few haunting notes, and handed it back. In that moment, Robert Johnson became something more than a man, a musician with a talent so extraordinary it could not be explained by mere practice. Whether truth or folklore, the story fueled a mystique around Johnson that would follow him his entire life. People whispered that he had traded his soul for his gift, that he was cursed and blessed in equal measure. And the music confirmed it. Songs like Crossroads Blues, Me and the Devil Blues, and Hellhound on My Trail carried confessions and warnings, eerie reflections of a life caught between worlds. A man dancing with forces unseen. By his early 20s, Robert Johnson was traveling the Delta almost constantly. He performed in small towns, often in smoke-filled juke joints, packed with people who felt a chill in the air when he played. Witnesses recalled the strange intensity of his performances. Eyes half closed, body swaying, voice weaving through the notes with a raw, almost supernatural power. Patrons sometimes claimed to see shadows stretch unnaturally across the walls, or to feel the air thicken, charged with an unseen presence. It was not only music, they were witnessing something extraordinary, something that unsettled and enthralled in equal measure. Johnson's charm, recklessness, and brilliance created both fans and enemies. Husbands and fathers glared silently at him, jealous of the attention he drew from women. Fellow musicians envied his skill. Those who attempted to harm him or to sabotage him often found misfortune not long after. It was as if some invisible hand protected or punished him, reinforcing the mythology that surrounded the man whose fingers danced across strings as though channeling something beyond mortal comprehension. In 1937 and 1938, the intensity of Johnson's life increased. His performances became legendary, his travels more frequent, and the tales surrounding him more eerie. He vanished at times for days or weeks, returning with skills that seemed impossibly acquired. He drank heavily, flirted with danger, and ignored warnings about women or rival musicians. And then came the night in Greenwood, Mississippi, where fate would finally catch up with him. Johnson was playing a roadhouse, performing with unmatched intensity. The room was thick with smoke, the crowd spellbound, yet a tension lingered. The bar owner had warned him to be cautious, but he raised a bottle to his lips, drinking recklessly. Later, he would fall violently ill. Some claimed the whiskey had been poisoned. Others whispered that the devil had come to collect his due. By the time he died, Robert Johnson was 27, leaving behind a body of work and a legend that would ripple through generations. His death was as mysterious as his life. No doctor could definitively explain it. He was buried quietly in an unmarked grave in Mississippi, yet the world would come to know his name forever. Every note he played, every song he wrote, continued to echo across the Delta and beyond. The 27 Club was born in that moment, though the world would only recognize it decades later. Hendrix, Joplin, Morrison, Cobain, Winehouse, each would follow the same age, leaving behind artistry immortalized precisely because life had been cut short. Even today, people who venture to the Crossroads claim they can hear faint guitar notes on the wind. Robert Johnson's story serves as both inspiration and warning, a haunting reminder that genius often comes at an extraordinary cost. Every chord he played, every lyric he sang, whispers across time. Some deals are eternal, some legends cannot die, and some souls are destined to burn brightly and vanish too soon. The Delta roads were long and unforgiving, stretching through small towns and endless fields where cotton swayed in the wind like restless spirits. Robert Johnson moved along them with a purpose that seemed almost otherworldly, carrying his guitar as both shield and weapon. At every roadhouse and juke joint, he performed with a precision and intensity that left audiences spellbound and unsettled. Patrons often spoke of the way his eyes seemed to see beyond the room, focusing on something far away, an invisible presence guiding his every chord. Some nights, Johnson would disappear completely. For days, he would vanish into the shadows of the countryside, sleeping under trees, walking along riverbanks, or disappearing into the woods. Those who saw him upon his return reported a change, as though the boy who had left had been replaced by a man touched by forces beyond human understanding. His music became richer, more complex, and almost impossibly mature. Notes and melodies that had once eluded him flowed effortlessly, bending reality and haunting the listeners. The legend of the Crossroads followed him everywhere. Musicians whispered that Johnson had not merely learned the blues, but had bargained with an entity that existed beyond mortal comprehension. Whether a literal devil or a metaphorical force, the story grew with each retelling. Some claimed that he had been taught songs that no human could learn naturally, melodies capable of moving hearts and unsettling minds. Others said that every time he performed, the room seemed to change, shadows stretched, the temperature dropped, and even animals reacted strangely. Robert's personal life was as turbulent as his music. Women were drawn to him, captivated by his charm and brilliance, yet his relationships were often fraught with danger and jealousy. Husbands and fathers watched silently, envious and wary, while other musicians seethed with envy at the skill that seemed beyond human. Johnson ignored warnings, living recklessly, drinking heavily, and pushing the boundaries of the world around him. Every night, he flirted with danger, yet the music always pulled him forward, compelling him to risk everything for a fleeting moment of transcendence. Stopped by 1937, Johnson's reputation had grown far beyond the Delta. Stories of his skill spread like wildfire, yet with fame came greater scrutiny. People debated the nature of his talent, wondering whether it was a gift or a curse. His performances inspired awe, but they also left an uneasy sense that something unnatural was at work. Some claimed that shadows moved strangely during his playing, that lights flickered without cause, or that patrons felt an inexplicable chill as if unseen eyes were watching. Despite, or perhaps because of the legends, Johnson continued to push himself. He would practice for hours in isolation, experimenting with chord progressions, vocal techniques, and rhythms that no one had attempted before. The intensity of his dedication bordered on obsession. Friends and fellow musicians noticed the toll it was taking on him. His gaunt frame, hollow eyes, and restless energy were signs of a man caught between worlds, straddling the line between brilliance and destruction. The night of his last Greenwood performance has become almost mythological. Witnesses reported that Johnson played with a fervor that transcended mortal ability, each note vibrating with emotion, each chord resonating with unseen forces. Hellhound, On My Trail, reportedly chilled listeners to the bone, as if the music itself carried a warning. He drank despite the bar owner's cautions, ignoring any advice or superstition. And in the days that followed, he fell gravely ill, writhing in pain, his life slipping away as quickly as his melodies had captivated the Delta. Even in death, Johnson's influence remained profound. Musicians who studied his recordings found themselves both inspired and unnerved. The mystical aura that had followed him in life seemed to linger in his songs, infusing them with a sense of urgency, tragedy, and inevitability. It became clear that Johnson's legend was more than talent. It was the story of a man whose brilliance was intertwined with forces he could neither control nor escape. The legend of Robert Johnson became the first thread in what would later be known as the 27 Club. His death at 27 marked the beginning of a pattern of artists of extraordinary talent whose lives were tragically brief. The idea of genius demanding a price took root, and musicians for generations would look to Johnson's story as both inspiration and warning. Even now, decades later, those who visit the Mississippi Crossroads claim to hear faint, ghostly guitar notes in the night. Some say it's the echo of Johnson himself, playing songs that warn, inspire, and haunt simultaneously. Others claim to feel the chill of a presence, an invisible force reminding them that greatness may come with a cost that cannot be avoided. By late 1937, Robert Johnson's life had become a whirlwind of music, travel, and tension. The boy who had once wandered the Delta barefoot was now a figure both feared and admired. His reputation preceded him, whispered from one roadhouse to the next, carried in hushed tones by patrons and musicians alike. Wherever he went, people spoke of the strange energy that surrounded him, how shadows seemed to stretch unnaturally, how the air could thicken, how animals reacted oddly to his presence. It was as though the universe itself had marked him, setting him apart from ordinary men. During these months, Johnson's travels became increasingly erratic. He moved from Clarksdale to Greenwood, to small towns along the Mississippi, often arriving unannounced. Friends and fellow musicians noticed how he seemed simultaneously restless and consumed by some unseen force. He would vanish for days, leaving behind questions, whispers, and curiosity that only fueled his growing legend. Some claimed he traveled to the Crossroads repeatedly, seeking to refine the pact that had given him unmatched musical skill. Others said he was fleeing invisible pursuers, shadows cast by the very deal he had made. Johnson's performances during this period reached unparalleled intensity. In smoke-filled juke joints, he would play for hours, weaving intricate melodies that seemed to echo from another realm. Patrons swore that when he played, the room itself became a living entity. The walls vibrated with the music, the floor seemed to pulse beneath his feet, and the flickering lanterns cast shapes that seemed to move of their own accord. Some who witnessed these performances felt a chill, an unexplainable fear, while others were completely mesmerized, unable to look away. Every note was a revelation, and every chord carried the weight of life, death, and something in between. Yet, Johnson's brilliance came with peril. His personal life grew more complicated and dangerous. Women were drawn to his magnetism, captivated by the intensity of his music and the aura of mystery that surrounded him. Jealous lovers, wary husbands, and envious musicians became shadows trailing him on his nightly journeys. There were confrontations, threats whispered in dark corners, and occasional brawls at roadhouses, though Johnson's skill and reputation often shielded him from serious harm. Still, danger seemed never far away, as if the universe itself had set forces against him to test the price of his gift. As the months passed, the toll of this lifestyle became visible. Johnson's frame grew thinner, his eyes more haunted, his movements restless. Friends and acquaintances remarked on his nervous energy, the way he seemed to anticipate threats no one else could see. At night, he would often walk alone, strumming chords into the darkness, perhaps seeking guidance, perhaps trying to stave off the inevitable. Rumors spread that he had enemies beyond the human realm, that the deal at the Crossroads demanded repayment, and that the hounds he sang of were not merely metaphorical. One particularly chilling tale recounts a night in Greenwood, when Johnson was performing in a packed roadhouse. Witnesses claimed that he played with an intensity that was frightening, his eyes rolling back momentarily, fingers moving faster than the eye could follow. During the final chord, the lights flickered violently, and a sudden chill swept through the room. Patrons reported feeling an invisible presence, as though someone or something was standing behind them, watching, waiting. By the next morning, Robert Johnson was reportedly found ill, writhing in agony. The circumstances were mysterious, and the cause of his illness remains debated to this day. Johnson's death ultimately was sudden and tragic. At 27, he passed away under circumstances that have never been fully explained. Some believe he was poisoned. Others insist it was a combination of illness and exhaustion, while legend maintains that the very forces he had courted at the Crossroads finally claimed their due. His passing left a void in the world of music, but it also cemented his mythos. The story of the first member of the 27 Club was born in the Mississippi Delta, intertwining music, brilliance, mystery, and death into a tale that would echo for decades. Even in death, Johnson's influence was palpable. Musicians across generations studied his recordings, sought to replicate his techniques, and were haunted by the aura of his story. His songs, lyrics, and the legends surrounding him became a template for the dangerous intersection of talent and tragedy that the 27 Club would come to represent. From Jimi Hendrix to Amy Winehouse, countless artists would follow a similar path, achieving greatness and meeting untimely ends, forever echoing the life and death of Robert Johnson. Bright lights, roaring crowds, and the relentless beat of 1960s London formed the backdrop of Brian Jones's life, a young man born into privilege yet restless in spirit. From a young age, he displayed a fascination with music that went far beyond casual interest. He could play nearly any instrument he picked up, absorbing the sounds of jazz, blues, and rock with a natural aptitude that astonished teachers and friends alike. By his late teens, Brian was experimenting in ways few of his contemporaries could imagine, combining exotic instruments with innovative techniques, shaping the soundscape of a new generation. Yet beneath the charm and musical brilliance, there was turbulence. Jones was sensitive, moody, and acutely aware of the gap between his artistic vision and the world's expectations. He struggled with insecurity, often doubting his place, even as he shaped the band that would become a global sensation. The Rolling Stones. The pressures of fame, the intense scrutiny of the media, and the constant expectations of audiences created a strain that he could never fully reconcile. By the early 1960s, Brian had become a central figure in London's music scene. He moved seamlessly between studios, clubs, and private parties, surrounded by a mix of admirers, collaborators, and rivals. People were drawn to his magnetism, his style, and his uncanny musical intuition. Yet, his personal life grew chaotic. Relationships strained under the weight of fame, friendships frayed by jealousy, and his own inner demons began to surface in unpredictable ways. The combination of drugs, alcohol, and restless creativity formed a dangerous cocktail, one that would follow him relentlessly in the years to come. Brian's genius was undeniable. He introduced the Rolling Stones to sounds and instruments that would define their early albums. His use of the sitar, the marimba, and other unusual instruments added layers of complexity to their recordings, making him a visionary in the studio. Yet his perfectionism often put him at odds with his bandmates, creating tension that would eventually affect the group's cohesion. Stories circulated about late-night recording sessions, arguments that escalated into chaos, and Brian's insistence on chasing the perfect sound at any cost. The tipping point came in the mid-1960s. While the Rolling Stones became international stars, Brian's lifestyle became increasingly erratic. His dependency on drugs and alcohol deepened, affecting both his health and his relationships. Reports from friends and colleagues describe strange behavior, mood swings, impulsive decisions, and bouts of paranoia. Some say he became obsessed with the supernatural, drawn to the idea that he was fated for a life and death unlike anyone else's. The myths began forming even as he lived, casting shadows over the vibrant, colorful life he led. In the summer of 1969, the tension reached a climax. Brian was no longer an official member of the Rolling Stones, having been asked to leave due to concerns over his reliability and personal struggles. Yet he remained surrounded by the music scene, parties, and friends who tried, in vain, to stabilize him. The nights were long, the drinks plentiful, and the whispers of danger seemed to follow him wherever he went. It was during this period that the events leading to his untimely death unfolded, shrouded in mystery, speculation, and unanswered questions that still intrigue fans decades later. On the night of July 3, 1969, Brian Jones was found dead at the bottom of his swimming pool at his country home in Sussex. He was 27 years old. The circumstances were suspicious. Some claimed accidental drowning. Others suggested foul play, and conspiracy theories flourished. Some close to him spoke of enemies, rivalries, or even business disputes within the music industry, while others maintained that his substance use and isolation contributed to his demise. The truth, however, has never been conclusively determined. Brian's death remains one of rock music's most enduring mysteries, a tragic end to a life that burned brightly and vanished too soon. Even in death, Brian Jones's influence on music and culture persisted. His innovations in sound, experimentation with instruments, and pioneering role in the Rolling Stones left a legacy that would inspire countless musicians. Yet his story also serves as a cautionary tale, a reminder that genius and chaos often walk hand in hand, and that talent can be both a blessing and a burden. The shadows surrounding his final days, the unanswered questions, and the myths of what truly happened continue to captivate and haunt, making Brian Jones one of the most enigmatic figures of the 27 Club. By the spring of 1969, Brian Jones's life had grown increasingly tumultuous. Although he had left the Rolling Stones, he remained an essential figure in the London music scene, attending parties, collaborating with other musicians, and experimenting relentlessly with sound. He became obsessed with blending exotic instruments and new recording techniques, often isolating himself for hours, sometimes days, in his home studio. Friends noted his extraordinary focus, but also his volatility. When interrupted, he could become irritable, even threatening, as though the music itself demanded absolute attention. Jones's personal relationships were similarly volatile. He had a string of romantic entanglements, some fleeting, some more serious, yet none provided the stability he seemed to crave. Lovers described him as both captivating and terrifying, charming one moment, withdrawn and brooding the next. Jealousy, insecurity, and substance use complicated these relationships further. Many of those close to him feared for his safety, sensing that his brilliance and recklessness were on a collision course with tragedy. Rumors and legends began to swirl around him. Some claimed that he had become fascinated with the occult, reading esoteric texts and consulting with mystics. Others whispered that he believed he was cursed, destined for a fate beyond ordinary comprehension. His fascination with mysticism and unconventional ideas only added to the sense of foreboding that surrounded him, making him an enigmatic figure both admired and feared by those in his circle. Professionally, Jones continued to innovate. Even after leaving the Rolling Stones, he contributed to recordings with unusual instruments, layering sounds in ways that few others could imagine. His work on tracks that would appear posthumously showcased a talent unmatched in the era, blending blues, rock, and world music influences. Yet, his genius was inseparable from his instability. As the summer of 1969 approached, friends and colleagues noted a growing tension in his demeanor, a restless energy that hinted at the approaching climax of his life story. On that fateful day in early July, the world lost Brian Jones under circumstances that remained shrouded in mystery. Found dead at the bottom of his swimming pool, the 27-year-old musician left more questions than answers. Some suggested accidental drowning, a tragic consequence of his substance use. Others suspected foul play, citing rivalries, resentments, and conflicts within the music industry. Conspiracy theories flourished, fueled by inconsistencies in witness accounts and the enigmatic nature of Jones himself. Regardless of the truth, the result was the same: the loss of a prodigious talent whose life had been defined by brilliance, turbulence, and an insatiable quest for musical perfection. Even decades later, Brian Jones's legacy continues to resonate. His innovations, eclectic style, and fearless experimentation influenced countless artists and shaped the course of modern music. Yet, his story remains a haunting cautionary tale about the fragility of life, the pressures of fame, and the thin line between genius and self-destruction. The mystery of his final moments, combined with his extraordinary talent, ensures that Brian Jones will forever remain one of the most enigmatic and tragic figures of the 27 Club. As the summer of 1969 unfolded, Brian Jones's life became increasingly surreal. The once charismatic musician seemed consumed by shadows, both literal and metaphorical. Friends reported seeing him pacing in the moonlight outside his Sussex estate, strumming his guitar to no one, murmuring melodies that seemed to rise from another world. The atmosphere around him grew tense, charged with a quiet electricity, as if the universe itself was aware of the precarious balance between his brilliance and his vulnerability. His isolation deepened. Despite invitations from fellow musicians, Jones increasingly preferred solitude, retreating into his home and the surrounding gardens. Some claimed he was haunted by voices, fragments of music, whispers of past conflicts, or perhaps his own conscience echoing in the night. The lines between reality and imagination blurred. Visitors noted his hands trembling, his gaze distant, his thoughts seemingly consumed by forces beyond ordinary understanding. The night before his death, Jones attended a small gathering at his home, surrounded by friends who described him as unusually introspective. He spoke little, strummed quietly on his guitar, and occasionally smiled as though engaged in a conversation with someone invisible. His energy was erratic, one moment lively, the next withdrawn. Some sensed an ominous tension in the air, a warning that something was approaching too swiftly to evade. As the mystery unfolds, one question remains. Was it fate, coincidence, or something far more sinister? In the next part, we'll step even closer to the truth.